Good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. China Books is very pleased to host this webinar, Playing with Ontake Rhythmic Moxibustion Methods from Japan with Oran Kivity. Quick housekeeping. We would prefer if your camera is turned on so we can see you and Oran can see you, if that's appropriate for you. Because of the size of the audience, we'll all be muted upon entry. At the end of the talk, Oran will leave plenty of time for a Q&A. You're welcome to send questions through on the chat box or hold them to the end and unmute yourself and ask questions. There will be plenty of time for that. This recording will be recorded or is being recorded now. That will be made available in about a week's time to everybody who's RSVP'd. Now to Oran. Oran has trained in Europe, China, Japan, has run a busy London practice, founding member of Toyohari UK, passionate about Japanese acupuncture. He continues to teach internationally with workshops in, geez, there's a whole list of countries. And I'm sure it's grown since, we wrote this down, but also in Australia. We were fortunate to host Oran's workshops in Melbourne last year. And this year, we'll be welcoming him to Melbourne and Brisbane. Now, big welcome for Oran.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. And thank you all very much for coming. I know it's dinner time, so you must be hungry. Where I am, it's only 5 p.m. So, we're going to be talking or hanging out for about 90 minutes. And during that time, I'm going to introduce Ontake. So let's just see whether the technology is working. Yes, so there's my name, Oran. And a big thank you, of course, to China Books for organizing this webinar and also for bringing me over last year and this year. So thank you, Trevor. Now, we're going to be looking at 3 topics today. And the first of those is that we're going to explore what Ontake is and the kind of things that it can do. And then we're going to learn, I'm going to show you a video about how to load bamboo. So some of you may already have some Ontake that you bought from China Books, or maybe you've come on workshops with me before. But anyway, I'm just going to show you a video of how to load the bamboo so you have an idea of how to fill it with moxa and what kind of moxa to use. So something very practical for you. And then I'm going to go into a more theoretical segment, and I'm going to talk about how we can use a simple treatment model for the rapid relief of pain on the midline of the body. So sore throat, chest pain, pubic symphysis pain, sacral pain, anywhere along the spine, so along this kind of circuit. So I'll talk about that as we go. And I'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers. I think after the first segment, we'll stop and you can ask me some questions. And then after the second segment, we'll stop again. And yeah, we'll just see how things go. But there'll be plenty of time for questions. So what is Ontake? Before I tell you what Ontake is, I just want to issue a video health warning. I am going to be watching I am going to be playing some videos, and sometimes just because of the technology, you'll find that it's very jumpy at your end. So if it's jumpy at your end and everything's not working well, don't worry, because we are recording this, and when I edit the webinar, I'll put in the videos so you'll see them in high res. So on the replay, you will be able to see the videos in better quality if there's a problem. So also that means you get to watch the replay. So let's just see what Ontake is. I'm going to, let's have a look if I can bring this out to the front and zoom it up. You'll see that it's a piece of bamboo which is filled with moxable. And you light it, and it gets hot, and then you can tap it with a lighted mouth on any part of the body, even the face and the head. And you can also use the side of the bamboo, so you don't have to do what I'm doing here. And that's essentially what it is. It's just a piece of bamboo filled with moxiball. So let me tell you a little bit about ontake. And I think what I'll do is I'll try and move. Oh, that's it. Yeah, if I try and move the camera a little bit so that I don't get swallowed by the posters. There you go. Okay, so what is ontake and where does it come from? It comes from Japan, and it's a tool that is really the new kid on the block. The first time it's mentioned in any kind of context is by a guy called Makoto Yamashita. And he may have been using it in the 1960s, but the first time in print is in 1992. And there's a very short section about what he calls bamboo ring moxibustion, because this is a ring, so he calls it bamboo ring moxibustion. There's a very short segment, and he says, oh, it's a very useful moxa tool. You can apply it where there's pain. You can needle, take the needles out, and then you can apply bamboo to where the pain was. So he writes about it as a local branch tool. And he also says, if you've been doing bloodletting and the bleeding doesn't stop, you can tap with the bamboo over the area where it's bleeding. So it's a way to seal the wound. But we wouldn't do that because, of course, if you get blood on an ontake, then you're not going to be able to use it on anyone else. The next person to write about it is Hideo Shinma. Some of you may have heard of Shinma sensei. He is the son of Fukaya sensei. Fukaya was a very famous moxibustion practitioner, and his son is now in his mid-80s. And Shinma sensei has been, he's actually a professional musician, he's a guitar player, but he's also made it his life's work to collate and disseminate his father's work and his father's kind of unpublished stuff. So Hideo Shinma wrote about it in around 2012. I came across ontake in 2009, and I first started writing about it about a year later. I had something published in Najon. So basically you can see that ontake is the new kid on the block. It's been around a very, very short time in the context of Chinese medicine, which is 2,000 years, and this has been around for 50, 60 years. So that gives us a kind of freedom because there's no orthodoxy attached to the use of ontake. No one is saying, not even me, no one is saying you've got to do it this way. There's no pope of ontake saying it has to be done this way. So there's no orthodoxy, and it allows us to use our imagination. And what I can say is that over the last, since 2009, so I've been using it in different ways and adapting different theoretical models to it and applying it in different and new ways. And I've always been delighted at how sophisticated this simple little tool is. So we can use it in various ways and at various levels. We can use it for root treatment. So, of course, you're aware that within acupuncture we have these kind of different levels of treatment. We can treat symptoms. Liver 3 is good for headache, gallbladder 20 is good for headache, and we can just needle those points with headache and get some efficaciousness, get some efficacy. But when we're treating holistically, then we want to try and figure out what's going on in the Zhangfu and in the channels in order to treat the headache. And we might use different systems. Master Tung would say one thing, and TCM would say another, and Japanese acupuncturists would say another. But we all want to get to the root of the problem. And ontake can be a very good thing on its own, to move qi and blood and to get to the root of the problem. So we can use it for root treatment. But I would say that in my practice, I'm using it 80% for branch treatment. And by branch treatment, I mean things like If someone's got sinus problems, I can use it on the face. If someone's got back pain, I can use it locally. If someone's got diarrhea, I can use it on the abdomen. If someone's got dysmenorrhea, I can use it in different ways to treat the period pain. So Ontake is a very useful branch treatment. So you can do what you normally do with your acupuncture, and then you can add Ontake as a kind of way to treat the symptoms. And its final use, which I like very much, is as an adjunctive treatment, which is somewhere in the middle where you're using it to augment what you've already done. So rather than separating root and branch, you might say, well, look, I've done this treatment and now I'm just going to work up and down on the back shoe points using Ontake to kind of add energy to the body, to kind of bring some extra chi into the system. As it can be used as an adjunctive treatment to anything else you're doing. So those are its applications. And there are different kinds of theoretical models that I have been using it with. And the first of those I will talk about just briefly. And yeah, which is Dr. Manaka's meridian frequencies. Dr. Manaka was a Japanese medical doctor who did a lot of research into the channel system. He died in 1987, I believe. And one of the things that he developed was this idea of meridian frequencies, that different meridians respond to different frequencies of beats per minute. And he used what we call Dr. Manaka's wooden needle and hammer. So he would use a metronome, he would set it to the frequency of the meridian, and then he would tap regularly with wooden needle and hammer. And I was fascinated by Dr. Manaka's meridian frequencies, and I was also fascinated by the rhythmic aspects of moxibustion. Because if you think that moxibustion is essentially a rhythmic treatment, if you put a moxicone on the skin and you light it, it kind of burns down like a candle, and when it gets too hot, you remove it. So if you're using a big cone, then that burns down slowly. If you're using a very small cone, it burns down very quickly and you replace it very quickly. So moxibustion is essentially a rhythmic treatment, and I was really interested to start to want to experiment with applying Ontake rhythmically with a metronome. So that is one of the main theoretical models that I use with Ontake, is applying it with a metronome at Dr. Manaka's meridian frequencies. Another theoretical model that we can apply it with is deficiency excess. And deficiency excess, in this case, I'm not talking about the kind of deficiency excess of the Zangfu organs, where we talk about kidney deficiency or liver excess. I'm talking about deficiency excess within the channels that is observable through palpation. So let me give you an example. Can some of you, if you feel like it, just participate. You can put your left hand on your right gallbladder 21 and just at the top of your traps. And you may notice, as I do, that there's some hardness there. So that's a kind of excess sign. It's where something exists. So this kind of excess is something that you can treat with Ontake. So that's something in the gallbladder channel. There's a local stagnation of qi and blood causing excess. But what you might notice in your practice is sometimes you turn people over and you look at gallbladder 21 and triple burner 15 and small intestine 12, and the whole area is sunken. It's like a dip or a valley. So that's a deficiency sign. So excess is where something exists, and deficiency is where something does not exist. So there's not enough qi and blood, so the tissues kind of collapse and become soft. You can see that sometimes at kidney 3. If you look at your ankles, you might see that there's a hollow there. So that's a deficiency. So what we do with Ontake is we supplement deficiency and we drain excess. And we use different techniques with the Ontake to do that. And we just go along the channel and balance deficiency excess within one channel. And what's interesting is that when you start palpating channels, you notice that some parts of the channel are excess and some parts are deficient. So if someone's got shoulder pain, you might notice that around large intestine 6 and 7, it feels a bit moist or damp. So you can apply Ontake around the forearm and release the tightness at the shoulder, at the deltoid. So that's a way of balancing within one channel. And we can also balance channels, like paired channels. Now, probably the most spectacular marriage of Ontake with theory is with holographic models. And by holographic models, I mean those things like hand acupuncture, ear acupuncture, or holographic systems. So you're all familiar, of course, with ear acupuncture, that the ear is a model or a hologram of the whole body. And we say that the earlobe is the head, and this is the spine here, and the internal organs are inside. And the same with Korean hand acupuncture. You can do this little experiment. I'll teach you Korean hand acupuncture. If you put your hands on a solid surface, like a table, just put all 5 fingers down, and then lift up your middle finger, and you'll see that you have a little quadruped. So a little like an anteater, and your thumb and your little finger comprise the back 2 legs, and your index finger and your 4th finger comprise the left leg and the right leg, and your 3rd finger is the neck and the head. So if you turn it up, you've got a little human there. So that's a holographic model again. So the idea of holographic models is every small part of the body reflects and contains all the information of the whole. So Ontake is very, very useful for treating all kinds of things, but in particular pain relief. And I use Dr. Tan's holographic models for the rapid relief of pain with Ontake. So it's one of its more spectacular uses. You can relieve pain within a minute or 2 of application. And the nice thing about Ontake is that it integrates very well with your practice. Now, sometimes you go to workshops and you learn stuff and you go, oh my goodness, this is going to revolutionize my practice. I'm going to have to stop doing what I do and take on all this new information, and I'm going to have to go to loads more webinars and train in this new thing. And then you end up going, oh, it's too unfamiliar, and you end up going back to what you were doing before. Well, Ontake isn't like that, because it's a tool. It's a tool that you can use within your practice. And I would say that within my practice, I use Japanese acupuncture, and I use Ontake for about 5 minutes with every treatment. So it's not like it takes over, and it's not like a cuckoo and it displaces what you already know. It just augments what you do, and it kind of dovetails really nicely with what you already do. So let's take a closer look at an Ontake. Here we go, here's an Ontake. So you can see it's just a tube of bamboo, and it's been sanded down at either end. And you can use it, you can apply the lighted mouth directly on the skin, because the moxa plug is pushed back. We'll see that when we examine how to load it. So you can tap directly with this lighted mouth, or you can use this side here and you can roll with it, or you can hold it in your hands and you can tap with it, or you can press with it. So it's a pressing tool, and it's a percussive tool as well. And if you think that Dr. Manika's wooden needle and hammer were a percussive tool, he was tapping with this. This is actually a drumstick, it's not his wooden needle, but similar. Wooden needle is about that long. So you knock on the end with the wooden hammer, and you set up a tiny little shock wave at the point. So you can emulate that by knocking with the side of the bamboo. So you can knock rhythmically holding this in your hand. And then you'll see that the lip here is rounded. So that means you can press with the lip as well. So if you want to get into tight joints like in the jaw or around the knee or the elbow, you can press quite deeply. So the equivalent of pressing with your thumb, but now you're pressing with a very warm pressing instrument. I think that's something I should say about Ontake before we go any further, really, is that it feels great and patients love to receive Ontake. So this is something that I think transformed my practice in a number of ways. The first was that I started to get more effective because I had Ontake. And the second was that my patients loved it and started asking for it. And it's kind of the part of the treatment that they enjoy the most. So they'll always say, "Are you going to do that bamboo thing again? Are you going to do that warm bamboo?" And it's something that's kind of significantly attractive to patients. I mean, we all know needling is not that nice. You know, it's okay, but patients don't look forward to being needled. They enjoy the relaxation once they've been needled, but they really do look forward to Ontake. I should say a little bit about the name Ontake. That was something that I came up with. It was previously known as short bamboo, tantake. And I thought that really didn't describe it. So I was working with a Japanese patient and I said, "Look, how would you say warm bamboo in Japanese?" He said, "Well, take is bamboo, and on is the same on as in onsen, as in a warm spring. So you could call it ontake." And since then, that name has kind of caught fire, and Sankei now sell these tubes not as short bamboo, but as ontake. So it's kind of more known now as ontake than as tantake or bamboo tube. So in terms of dimensions, Yanagishita described it as roughly 3.5 centimeters in width, in diameter, and roughly 4 or 5 centimeters in length. And the skin of the bamboo is about 3 to 4 millimeters thick. The thinner the skin, then the hotter the thing gets. And the thicker the skin, like if it's like 5 or 6 millimeters, then it doesn't get so warm. So you want to have a kind of middle, kind of ideal thickness, which is not too thick and not too thin. So yeah, I think that's what we can do about that. So here's one. You can see it's not much bigger than 3 fingers. You know, it's just 4 centimeters. It fits very comfortably into my hand, and I can apply it by tapping like this. I can press with the lip. I can roll. And I can use it percussively. I can knock on where there's thick muscle tissue. So it's a very versatile tool. Now, what I'm going to try and do is play you a video now, and hopefully you'll be able to hear and see things well. But if this doesn't work out, then I have a backup plan. So let's see what happens. Hello there. In the first of these training videos, I'm going to be showing you how to load bamboo. And the first thing to talk about is how densely you pack the moxa into the bamboo. If you pack it in very densely, then it will be very safe. It will be stuck in there, jammed in there, and it can't move around. But it won't be able to breathe very well. There won't be so much oxygen getting in. However, if you pack it loosely, it will breathe very well and it will burn very evenly, though with a bit more smoke. However, it will be less secure within the ontake, and if you do very vigorous techniques, then it might move or it might even fall out. So you need to make a balance between these two things. The next is we need to make a distinction between ontake that are brand new and ontake that have been used for a while. So I suspect the one that you've got in your hand is brand new, and if you look at it, you'll feel that the inside of the bore is very smooth. It's just normal bamboo. And that means there's not much friction to grasp the plug. But when you've used ontake a few times, then the wood becomes seasoned. It becomes rough and black, and the wood fibers kind of stick out a little bit. So this means that it can grip the ontake much better. What we're talking about is making a balance between packing the plug very densely, which is safe, and packing the plug very loosely, which allows it to burn much better and to be more effective as a heating tool. Now, these things sound difficult, but the more you do them, then the more they become second nature, and you'll be able to judge just from the touch whether your plug is too tight or too loose. In this first example, we're going to load a seasoned bamboo, and you can see that the bore is carbonized and rough on the inside. So first things first, lay the bamboo on its side and put moxa in from both ends. And you can just shovel in moxa until it feels vaguely tight, and then put the bamboo vertically upwards and rotate it, a bit like opening a can of cat food or opening a can of tuna. Just rotate and press with your thumb. Now, you can do a safety test. If you push with your index finger on either side of the plug, it shouldn't move much. So then you can use the piece of wood to just finesse the end so that it's nice and flat at both ends. And then you'll see that the moxa is about 3 or 4 millimeters from the end on both ends. Now in this next example, we're using a brand new piece of ontake, which you can see is much smoother on the inside. It's completely clean. So same as before, put the bamboo on its side and shovel in moxa from both ends. And this time you'll notice that I'm going to put in a bit more moxa than I did on the first ontake, which was seasoned. Once you put in enough moxa, then remember the can of tuna. We're going to turn the bamboo vertically upwards and then rotate it. There we go. So rotate and press with your thumb. Rotate and press with your thumb, just like opening a can of tuna. And then you can compress with the dowel. So notice I'm compressing a little bit more than before. And now we'll do a safety test and see if we can move the plug. And can you see the plug is very mobile? So that's not safe. We need to add more moxa and compress it some more. So I'll do that. Just shovel in some more moxa. And again, can of tuna, rotate the bamboo. Compress a little bit with the dowel. Finesse the ends so they look nice. And now, can you see how solid the plug is? It shouldn't feel too dense, but it should feel immobile. So there we go. There's a seasoned ontake and a brand new ontake, both loaded and ready to go. But for some of you, you're going to find that if the plug runs from end to end in the ontake like that, then it just gets too hot for you to hold and it's not comfortable. So I'm going to show you a variation, which I think comes from Shinma Sensei and Yamashita Sensei, which is just simply cooler and easier for you to hold if you have sensitive hands. We're going to load the bamboo in exactly the same way as before, but using less moxa this time. We're going to put a little bit of moxa in from the sides, and then we're going to tamp it down with the baton and compress it in the middle so there's a very tight plug right at the center of the bamboo. Well, what we've done now is we've created a very tight plug right in the center of the bamboo so that the plug is away from the mouth at either end. You can see there's a big gap there. And this means that the bamboo is actually cooler to hold because one end is not going to get hot. And also, if you're rolling with bamboo, it's in the palm of your hand, it's going to feel cooler for you. And finally, when you're doing tapping techniques on your patient will experience the bamboo as cooler as well. So let's go through some of the key takeaways to this lesson. The first is to do with the density of the plug. So if the plug is very dense, it's very secure, but it breathes less easily. If it's very loose, the combustion is much better, but it's less secure. So you have to weigh those things up. The second is to do with the length of the plug. I normally practice with a long plug running almost end to end with just 3 millimeters at either end. But if you find that too hot to hold, then make a central plug, which is very tightly compressed in the middle of the bamboo, and that will be easier on your hands if your hands are sensitive. Any questions? You're welcome to type questions into the chat and Trevor will read them to me, or you can unmute and ask a question.
I've got
Are
a
there
question.
any questions?
I've got a
Yeah,
question.
go ahead.
When you're doing the cooler version, do you do that with the face and sensitive parts of the body?
No, I think for me, I don't do the cooler version because I don't find it too hot to hold. But there are practitioners who do. They just say, Oran, I just find it a little bit too hot. So then I recommend that cooler version is for them. So it's a kind of, some Japanese practitioners, they like that version as well. They say it's less dosage. So it's less dosage for the patient.
And you use the same type of rules, I guess, in terms of looking for the warmth with the client.
Yes, looking for deficiency excess and trying to apply it. Now, interestingly, what you said is, when I'm working on the face, I actually have different size bamboos, and I'll try and show you. So, what we're talking about here is what I call the standard size. This is just the standard on take. And if you see here, I've got one which is the same length, but is much narrower. So I call that a baby or a mini ontake. And so the bore is much more narrow. And this one is really good for working with kids. And it's really good for working on the face. So I tend to use this little one, the mini ontake, for working on the face. I have some patients who say, you're not coming near my eyes with that. So then they're okay if I come with this one. And then you can see here, that's the standard ontake. And this is what I call a super ontake, which was developed by Philip Caude in Spain. And this one, we just load into one end. We load the plug into one end. And it's cooler to hold because there's no moxa burning at this end. So you can hold it like that. And this is good for people who like to press really hard, who do a lot of very deep body work, because you've got more leverage. And it's also good because one end is cool. So again, if you're the kind of person whose hands feel too hot with ontake, then super ontake is also very useful. Now, thanks for that question, Joe.
Can I read a couple out to you, Oran?
Yeah.
Gabriella was asking how smoky the bamboo gets. And I've got quite a few questions, but another one that goes with that is what kind of moxa do you use?
Right. Okay, so it's very surprising that ontake doesn't generate much smoke. It's just very surprising. If you pack it well, as saw in the video, and it's not too tight and it's not too loose, it just smolders, but there's not a lot of smoke. It's not like burning moxa cones or like burning a moxa stick or burning moxa on the end of the needle. All of those methods generate much more smoke than ontake. So it's actually kind of surprisingly smokeless. Yeah, that's the first question.
And the kind of moxia that you use?
Yeah, yeah. So the kind of moxa that most of us were taught with is the green moxa from China. And that moxa is quite twiggy. It has a lot of particulate matter. So I recommend that you use medium grade, medium refined moxa from Japan. So stuff like Wakakusa moxa or Myojo moxa, but basically medium grade moxa. And I think China Books knows which moxa is good and has some on stock, in stock. Now the reason for this is that the coarser the moxa, the more little bits of twig and kind of small fibers there are and dust. And when you're doing this kind of percussive tapping, these things fall out. Whereas with the medium grade moxa, you don't get those bits of dust, or at least they're far fewer. So you don't get stuff falling out when you do these percussive techniques. So I strongly recommend a kind of yellowish medium grade moxa. That's not the kind of moxa that you do rice grain moxa. That is really super refined and is very yellow or gold in color. So you want something which is more refined. So yeah, something like this. You can see it's a yellowish color rather than green. Any other questions, Trevor?
Yeah, a couple more. And of course, we do have Wakakusa grade at China Books. A couple more questions. Natalie's asking, how long can you use the bamboo before you need to replace it with a new one? And then maybe we can talk about techniques for lighting.
Okay. I mean, I have a lot of ontake because I line them up before the start of a clinic day. So I have lots of ontake and I use one on each patient. And I'll talk about sterilizing in a minute because I think that comes up. So I like to use one ontake on each patient. But I have ontake that I've had for years. And I remember when my very first ontake finally gave up the ghost, it was quite a few years. It developed a split down the middle. So ontake really last a long time, but I think it's good to have several. It's good to have several and line them up. In terms of sterilizing, so far there's no regulations about ontake in any acupuncture, under any acupuncture organization. So we have to use our common sense and we have to try and anticipate what might be thought or said about them. Now, clearly it's not a good idea to autoclave ontake or to put them in some kind of steam or boiling water. So that's not a good idea. So what I do is I have a UV cabinet, which is the same kind of UV cabinet the barbers use to sterilize their scissors and their combs and stuff. And I sterilize them in a UV cabinet. And usually the sterilization cycle takes about 5 or 10 minutes. And I think that's good enough because you must remember that this is not penetrating the skin. It's not sucking up the skin like a cup. It's just like a doctor's stethoscope. It's touching the skin. It's probably no more dirty than your hands. So I think a UV cabinet is quite adequate, and I like to do that. Like I say, I have a load of ontake set up at the start of the day, and then each time I use it, it goes in the UV cabinet. At lunchtime, I run the cycle, and then I can use them all again for the afternoon round. So that's what I would say. They last a long time, so thank you for that question. They really do last a long time.
Benjamin was asking about techniques for lighting, or will you come to that later, Oran?
How was the quality of the video?
Maybe somebody else might want to jump in here,
Yeah.
but the sound was really good, but the video was quite a way behind, so it was quite
Yeah.
jagged. So then it
Yeah,
moved really
so
quickly, and then it stopped for quite a while.
Yeah, it was a little bit jagged even here. Yeah, that's a nice idea. Yeah.
When we do the
So,
when we send the recording out, we'll put the full video in, so you'll get the better product.
yeah. Okay, so thanks, Bill. So I think maybe rather than playing you a video, I can drop it into the replay. But rather than playing you a video, because we're having technical problems today, I might just demonstrate it. So let me see how much you can see. Here's an ONTAC, and you can see I've loaded it more or less to the lip. It's about 3 mm from the lip. You don't want the plug to come all the way to the lip, because then you're just kind of branding your patients if you tap on them, and they get a big O for ONTAC, which is good PR in one way, but not in another. So both ends I load to about 3 mm from the edge. Now you now if you get an ordinary gas lighter, like the kind that you light cigarettes with, you're going to run into problems, because this kind of flame will leave a lot of soot on the lip of the bamboo, and also is not very precise. So you'll be trying to light the moxa, and you'll just be getting, you see that's already got some carbon on it. And so once you tap this to the skin, you'll get like black circular marks, as on my hand. So that's not an ideal way. So what you need to get is a jet lighter, the kind that you can get from a cigar store or from a cookery store. And the jet lighter has a very distinct blue flame. And with that, you can just play it on the center of the plug, and then that will light the plug, and then it will smolder away, and you're good to go. Now, what happens is that the lip gets warm, and then eventually the whole thing gets warm. Now, when you're done, you need to extinguish the bamboo, and the way you extinguish it is by depriving it of oxygen. So you can just get a large coin and put it on top. Or you can get a cupping jar and put it on top, or a paper cup. So that's how you extinguish it, is just simply deprive it of oxygen. Okay, there were more questions, I think.
Just one more. Jen was asking, oh, and if anybody else unmute yourself, but Jen was asking about just again the safety aspect of using burning loose moxa. Does it ever come out? Have you ever had problems with that?
No. I would say never. I mean, it's 2009, so it's quite a few years now, 14, 15 years. I've not had any problems, because I'm using good quality moxa, and even with these percussive techniques that I use, it never drops out. So I've never had red hot ash land on a patient. Sometimes I get a little bit of black ash land on the skin. It's not hot and people don't complain, but you just brush it off. But so sometimes once it's burned, some black ash will drop off, but never a problem. There's never been any injuries with ONTAC. The kind of accidents I have had with ONTAC have been where I drop it on the floor and there's carpet on the floor, and then once it drops on the floor and things drop out onto the carpet. So that's happened. And then I also have I have these, which are ceramic ONTAC, which are made by someone in France, and I have had the experience of dropping that on the floor, and then that shattered, and then red hot moxa went all over the tile floor. But it was a tile floor, so it wasn't the end of the world. And probably if it had been a carpeted floor, it wouldn't have broken. So those are the kind of accidents I've had. They haven't involved patients, they've involved floors. I saw a question, how long does it stay warm for? Yeah, about 20 minutes, I'd say. Yeah, about 20 minutes. Sometimes you need to relight it, that it just organically goes out, or you're working on someone and you blow on it a few times to kind of to get it warmer again. But sometimes you just need to relight it in mid-flow, just because it feels better when it's hot rather than when it's just slightly warm. Alrighty. Okay, I'm gonna give you a presentation on how to apply Ontake to treat midline pain. And I'm going to play some video and I'll come out of the slide to play video, I think. So let's try and introduce midline pain. So I'm going to reiterate what I've told you about Ontake. Essentially, it's like a mobile Moxa box. A Moxa box traditionally is a big thing, it's a big affair, but this is very mobile and very light and very agile. And we can use it for balancing the body, and we can use it with holographic models. And one of the things that's important with Ontake, at least in the way I use it, is palpation, and palpating for deficiency excess on the skin. So this is not to say that, oh, because this person's liver excess, we're going to treat excess, and because this person's kidney deficient, we'll treat kidney deficiency. It's just basically we treat what we find on the skin. So we palpate and say, oh, this bit's a bit sunken, this bit's a bit excess, so I'm going to supplement here, and I'm going to roll here, and try and get them more even. So it's a very simple kind of yin-yang theory based on palpation. So I'm going to introduce this simple theoretical model. And we'll go back to basics. We'll talk about the three axes of yin and yang. So we know we've got this idea in Chinese medicine that there's heaven, and there's the person, and then there's the earth. So we stand between heaven and earth. And if you take a straight line from heaven down to earth, you get this axis which divides left from right. And if you take another line from heaven and run it down to the earth, you've got another axis that divides front from back. And then if you take a final axis, which is horizontal, and you take it at the middle part of the body, then you've got a line that separates upper from lower. And so that gives us our sagittal, frontal, and transverse planes. And you can see from my model that these three intersecting planes create four anterior quadrants. You can see four quadrants at the front, and you can visualize the four quadrants at the back. So 8 quadrants, 8 octants, sorry. So yeah, that gives us an idea of these quadrants. And quadrants can be used to treat each other. So we can say that anything in the upper part treats the lower part, and vice versa. And anything in the front part treats the back, and vice versa. And left treats right, and vice versa. So if someone's got sciatica in the left leg, which is in the lower left posterior quadrant, then you would look to treat the upper right quadrant anteriorly. And in actual fact, I've given you a very quick overview of Dr. Maneker's octahedral model. So he had this octahedral model of the body, and he thought that the 8 extras create these planes and these lines in the body. So his treatment model was based on that. Okay. So let's think about sore throat. So sore throat is in the anterior part of the body, and it's superior. And it could be on the midline, or it could be in the left quadrant, or it could be in the right quadrant. So it could be slightly left or slightly right, or both. So if we want to treat sore throat, we need to find somewhere on the body that's opposite according to the octahedral model. And if we think about that, then that's going to be, if throat is superior, then it's got to be inferior, and throat is anterior, so it's got to be posterior. And if the throat pain is on the midline, well, then the treatment area has got to be on the midline. And if the throat pain is more on the left, then the treatment area needs to be more on the right. Or if the throat pain is more on the right, then the treatment area needs to be slightly opposite. And that ends up looking like this. Let me enlarge it. So the red area is the throat, and you can see that the opposite area is the sacrum. So that is our opposite according to our octahedral model. I'm not sure if I can reduce that. Let's have a look. Can I make it shrink again? Yes. Okay. So now that we've got an idea of what area to treat, we also need to think about channels and channel pairings. So let's talk about that. Because channel pairings are a very dynamic part of on-TACE therapy. It's really useful when someone's got pain in the large intestine channel to treat the lung channel, for example. It's really useful to treat, if someone's got pain in the large intestine channel, to consider treating the stomach channel. So using pairings is very, very useful with on-TACE. And we can also think about channel pairings, internal, external, yin-yang pairings with this model. So let's think about the throat first of all. We can think of two channels going through the throat. One of them is the renmai. It's the renmai coming up into the throat, and the kidney channel, which comes to kidney 27. And then there's a deep pathway from kidney 7 that goes up through the throat and into the root of the tongue. So we want to find something that pairs with kidney and something that pairs with renmai. So I think you can see where I'm going with this. If I take you to the next slide, we know that flowing through the sacrum is the dumai, which is the opposite channel, opposite vessel to the renmai, and the bladder channel, which is the opposite channel or paired channel to the kidney channel. So in order to treat sore throat, we are going to work on both the kidney and the bladder as they go through the sacrum. Right, so I think that then what I'll do is share a screen and I'll play the video and we'll see how the quality fares with this thing. So if I go to share. The first thing you want to do is check the sacrum for reactions. By reactions, I mean areas of hot and cold, or puffiness, or areas of pressure pain. So make a note of those reactions, and those are what we're going to try and treat. So we're just going to light our bamboo. And we want to make sure it's not too hot. So just tap against the palm of your hand and then against your wrist. If it's comfortable on your wrist, it should be comfortable on your patient. And we'll start by tapping lightly with the bamboo. And then you can get your patient to swallow and see whether there's been a change in the sensation of the sore throat. then you can start to do rolling. Rolling is slightly deeper. So just rolling with the bamboo, working into the tissues of the sacrum. And once again, you can stop, you can get the patient to sit up and swallow again and see if there's been any change. You can also roll longitudinally along the line of the sacrum. Now, sometimes the sore throat will be more on one side than the other, and we want to treat the opposite side. So if the sore throat is on the left-hand side, you want to focus on the right-hand side of the sacrum. If the sore throat is on the right-hand side, you want to focus on the left-hand side of the sacrum. And if the sore throat is right in the middle, you focus more on the midline. So let's assume that someone has sore throat on the right. We would be rolling slightly more on the left here. And once again, check for reactions. If the pressure pain has changed, then you can finish. Okay, I'll take some questions and then I'll finish off the lecture. So I'm sure there'll be some questions for, at this point.
I do have one. So if it's too hot, like I tap on my hand and my wrist and it's too hot, do I then have to like redo, apply the moxa like for less so that it's cooler, or?
No, you just have to wait for a while. So what I was demonstrating is a basic safety test. So the first thing I do is I tap it against my hand, which is quite leathery, and I get a sense right away, oh, that's a bit hot. I've managed to play the flame across the wooden lip. So the lip is kind of, you know, actually the wood is hot because I missed with the flame. So then I just need to leave it a little while, maybe 20 seconds or so. And then after that, it will be cool enough and I can tap it on my palm again. If it feels okay on my palm, then I tap here, which is where mums use, you know, where they're testing the bottle for temperature. And if it feels good there, then you're good to go. You can start working on the patient. So you don't have to redo it. It's just you need to wait for a little bit for it to cool down. Because usually if it's too hot, it's because you've managed to heat up the lip with a flame in the ignition process. So thanks for that question.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll read one out if I can, Oren. Ayla asked, you mentioned feeling for reaction areas. How would this change the way you treat an area?
Right. So I've been talking about this idea of deficiency excess. And we palpated our gallbladder 21 to get a sense of what excess feels like. So let's say that we're palpating on the sacrum and I find that the sacrum feels cold. Then I'm going to start doing some light tapping with a lighted mouth. And I'm going to be just trying to warm that up. But if when I'm pressing on the sacrum, I find that there's some tightness or some bands of tension, then I might do a slightly deeper technique. So some techniques are more supplementing and some are more draining. So you react to the tissue as you palpate the tissue. So sometimes, like I was talking about on the arm, you'll find that some areas are very tight and some areas are very deficient, or kyo is the Japanese word. So you just balance, you treat what you find, and as you get used to working in this way, it's very linear. So, oh, this is a bit soft, I'm going to supplement here, and oh, this is a bit tight, I'm going to press a little bit harder here. So you just start reacting to what you find. So yeah, that's basically what you're doing on the sacrum. And this kind of balancing, according to Kyo and Jitsu, according to deficiency excess, is very powerful. It has very holistic effects throughout the body.
So I just have one more question. Earlier you said that you apply it for 5 minutes. So if someone has a sore throat and like a sore shoulder, would in total it be only 5 minutes, or 5 minutes for the sore throat and then 5 minutes for the sore shoulder?
Okay. You touch on a very interesting issue there, which comes up a lot in Japanese acupuncture, and that is how much should I do within one treatment? And patients will urge you to do as much. They'll say, I've got this pain in my shoulder, and I've got my sore throat, and I've got this, and oh, well, I know we've just finished and I'm dressed, but I've got this funny feeling here, and can you do anything about that? And what can happen if you allow the patient to take over during a session is that you can end up over treating and undoing the good that you've done in the previous 40 minutes. So I tend to rely on the root treatment to do most of the work, and then I'll bring on take to treat the most prominent symptom. And sometimes, so sometimes I'll say to the patient, what would you like me to work on? Would you like me to work on your sore throat or your shoulder? Because I find that if I work on lots of symptoms, I start to scatter the energy, and then they feel worse afterwards. So I'll be doing a lecture all about dosage and over treatment, which I think is so useful for all acupuncturists. It doesn't have to be Ontake practitioners, but the lecture is really one of the most important lectures in the 3 days that I teach, is on dosage and judging how to judge dosage and how to moderate dosage for different patients, different kinds of patient. I'll say one more thing, is that some patients are very robust, and you can do some stuff for the sore throat and you can do some stuff for the shoulder. But most of our patients tend to be slightly deficient, and then they tend to be the ones who get over-treated more easily.
And then,
so thanks for that question.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, I just have one more. I would turn my camera on, but for some reason it's not letting me, so sorry about that. But if I'm applying it for the sore throat and after 2 minutes, let's say the sore throat's gone, should I keep applying it for 3 more minutes, or should I just stop?
No, I snatch 5 minutes out of the air to give you an idea of how I integrate Ontake into my practice. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So don't feel that 5 minutes is written in stone, and that you have to treat for 5 minutes. So I treat until I get a change. If things change, then I move on, and I always go back to the pulse and make sure that the patient is reacting okay on an energetic level, and that I'm not over treating. So when I said 5 minutes, it's more to give you an idea that in a 45-minute session, maybe 5 minutes of that will be taken up with Ontake. Sometimes it's a bit longer, but not often.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Samira. Now, I'm going to I think, talk very briefly about how you can extend this model, because it's a fun model, Dr. Manika's octahedron model. There we go. So I want you to imagine, you don't have to imagine it, you can picture it right there, a vampire, we've hammered a stake into the center of his torso. And I do that not because I want to be sadistic, but because I want to give you an idea of the human body is like this. So what we were saying was that someone has a sore throat. Let's say this is the anterior part of the body. Someone's got a sore throat. So we went to the opposite. We went down there to this posterior, inferior part here, because the sore throat is superior and anterior. But you can equally well say, well, look, what if they've got a pain at the nape of the neck? Well, then you can go right down to the REN 2, REN 3, REN 4 area, and you're going to be affecting it. And if the pain is in the bladder channel, you can work on the kidney channel. So you've got this kind of opposite sense here. And you can also think of mid-thoracic pain, then you can treat it from the kidney channel directly opposite. So this model, pubic symphysis pain, you can treat from the back of the neck, from do 14 area. So you can just imagine this. That's had this kind of slightly humorous graphic of a vampire being stabbed with a stake, but it gives you an idea of this opposites. Now, we can take this idea a little bit further. So I can just do it more graphically now. So there's Ren and Do. So you can just, this is the piece of bamboo or the stake, just going through the opposite part of the body. And there we go again for pubic symphysis pain. And I'll say that none of these ideas are very new, because everyone's familiar with the idea of do 20 for hemorrhoids. So for do 20 for hemorrhoids, we're saying, well, we put moxa at do 20 and it brings the central chi upwards. So if there's prolapse, prolapse and there's veins popping out, then you can suck them back in by applying heat here. So it's exactly the same principle. This is the octahedral model. So we're actually now just using it with Ontake instead. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to talk about here, because I think it'd be useful to talk about the workshops that are coming up and the kind of things that we'll be discussing. So let me get rid of those and just go to camera. Yeah. What I'm really looking forward to doing is training you. It's a two-part program. There's a level 1 and there's a level 2. And level 1 is going to, day 1 on level 1 is going to give you everything you need to know about applying Ontake. So how to load it, what moxa to use, how to apply it. And we're going to practice a whole body root treatment. So we're going to basically treat the whole body, focusing in particular on the back shu points. So day 1 is a very practical day, and we are going to learn a lot of different strokes: tapping, rolling, knocking, super knocking, touching and closing, pressing, leaning. So a number of techniques that we're going to learn to apply with Ontake, and we're going to practice palpation. So by the end of day 1, you will have learned a whole body routine. And that's very useful, because when you learn a whole body routine, it means that you are already familiar with working on the arms, working on the legs, working on the neck, working on the tummy, and working on the back. So nothing's going to surprise you when in your practice. If you say, oh, well, I just need to work on this person's arm, you're already familiar with it from day 1. On day 2, we do the most exciting stuff, which is how, I call it Ontake 1, 2, 3, which is a hats off to Dr. Tam, who wrote a book called Acupuncture 1, 2, 3. And within Acupuncture 1, 2, 3, he talked about a way to treat pain using paired channels and holographic models. So I've adapted this as a needle-free version of Acupuncture 1, 2, 3, and it's really good for pain relief. So if someone has back pain or shoulder pain or finger pain, you can treat it very, very quickly using Ontake 1, 2, 3. And in the afternoon, we'll look at symptom relief, like how do you treat diarrhea, how do you treat sinusitis, how do you treat anxiety, how do you treat insomnia. So we'll look at specific conditions, and we'll also talk about dosage, which is the lecture I talked about, which I think is the most important lecture of the 3 days. So that's level 1, which is 2 days, and level 2, sorry, is the 3rd day, which is Hirata zones. And Hirata zones is another holographic approach. Hirata came up with this holographic mapping of the body. He divided the body into regions like the face, the head, the neck, the torso, the arms and the legs. And he mapped out these zones, the Hirata zones, on each of these regions. And there's a spleen region, there's a stomach region, there's a heart region, there's a liver region. So you can tap these zones. So if someone has liver problems, you can tap the liver zone in all these different regions. Or you can give them an Ontake, you can give your patient an Ontake and say, I want you to go home and I want you to do moxa on the liver zone. every day until you come back next week. So it's a way to continue the momentum and to empower your patients. So Hirata was a very idealistic practitioner, and he wanted to come up with a treatment system that empowered people to treat themselves at home. So this is a really wonderful system, and it's very useful to integrate again into our acupuncture. So frequently when the needles are in, I will start to do the appropriate Hirata zones. So if someone's got a spleen or stomach problem, then whilst the needles are in, I'll just start tapping on the available spleen zones on the arm, spleen zones on the leg, spleen zone on the torso. So very, very useful. And also very good for internal problems. So I use the Dr. Tan stuff with Ontake more for pain relief, and I use the Hirata stuff more for internal problems. So very useful adjunctive tool. And once again, you don't have to unlearn anything. It's just stuff that you can layer on top of what you already do. So I think that's all I need to say about the workshops, Trevor. Is there anything else I should say?
I don't think so. I think that's everything. I think most people know that you'll be in Melbourne for Ontake Warm Bamboo 5th and 6th of October. The following Tuesday is for Harada Zone, and then in Brisbane, 12th and 13th of October, with Harada Zone the following Tuesday. I think most people know that, and if you don't, I'm sure you'll get emails or contact me.
Thanks, Bill. And I think what I'd like to emphasize is that when you study with me, you get a lot of hands-on work, because this is a very practical workshop. So yes, there are lectures, and yes, there's theory, but you will be practicing for at least half the day, and you'll be getting results right away. You'll be amazed at Ontake and how good it feels and how quickly things change. So I think I always get this thrill with teaching Ontake because it's such an exciting thing to introduce to people. It's such a useful tool. And I have to say that from my own practice, my practice just grew and grew and grew once I started using Ontake, because patients love it and they ask for it and they come back for it. So it's something that you can really, will really, I think, supercharge your practice. So very useful. I think there's another question in the chat, is that right? So the question is, if the moxa lasts about 20 minutes, do you discard the rest? Well, I'll show you. I think I can answer that better in the workshop by demonstrating, but basically, let me see if I can answer it in principle. You can see here that this Ontake has been burnt, so there's a kind of blackened core. And what you get is, I have a very expensive tool, a very expensive tool that I bought from an ice cream shop. It's a Magnum stick. And what you do is you just dig away at the ash and you get rid of all the blackened ash. And what you're left with is a core of unburnt moxa. So then you can fill up the plug once again with fresh moxa and you're good to go. So I call this the dental method. You can just pick away at it. Of course, what you can also do is you can expel the plug. So you can have a small, it's called a packing rod, and you just press it and the whole plug comes flying out. Don't do that when it's lit, only do that when it's extinguished. Otherwise you'll get a lot of smoke. And that's another way. Then you just refill the bamboo with fresh moxa. So thanks for that question.
All right. It's almost 8:30. If we have any more questions, now's the time to throw them in. Otherwise, we do have somebody who's asking about available as a video. I know we have plans, and I know you have some videos available on Net of Knowledge, and we do have plans in the future, but nothing like hands-on practice working with you.
Yeah, so if you want to study, there's a there's a 90-minute module on Net of Knowledge called Ontake 101, where I'm talking pretty much about what I've done now, but all the videos are stacked up. There are 6 videos of close-ups of loading, lighting, and treatment, and a fair amount of theory, a fair amount of introduction and theory. So if you want to get started right away, you can go to Net of Knowledge and do Ontake 101. I think it's only about $30 or it's very cheap. And that is just your introduction. But if you want I think the in-depth comes from hands-on practice and working with a teacher, and particularly the palpation skills come from working with a teacher. So I do, if you're serious about Ontake, I do encourage you to come to Melbourne or Brisbane. Brisbane, I fancy Brisbane, yeah. Been to Melbourne now.
Thank you so much, Oran. Always a pleasure, always interesting. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you all, guys. Thank you very much for coming, and enjoy your dinner. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the replay will be available.
Yes, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. We will. This has been recorded. We'll be editing it out. We'll get the video that Oran played, the 2 videos, and in a bit over a week, maybe 2 weeks, it'll be sent to everybody who RSVP'd. Talk to everybody soon. Thank you, Oran.
Great, my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aaron. Bye.
Thank you.